Hey, it's Norm from Tested.com. I'm here at E3 2014 during my ceremonial interview with Nate Mitchell, VP of Product of Oculus.
Yep.
Now, the last time we talked to you was GDC,
Yep.
and that was right before some big announcements came out. I'm going to ask you some questions about that.
Sure.
But the question I know a lot of our viewers and Oculus fans want to know is what's the status of DK2? Right now, Development Kit 2.
Yep. So the second development kit, we're on track to, Will's going to crash into me here. We're on track to ship in July. Everything's going well. We just wrapped up the pilot run, shipped about 100 units out to key developers. They actually built a lot of the content that we're showing here at E3 today. And mass production's sort of underway. So actually a big portion of the Oculus team's currently in China. There's a lot that goes into manufacturing, but we're on track and things are going well.
What you guys showed at GDC, those are probably the first of the
Yep.
DK2s.
Yep.
Is that a reasonable time frame from like when you have that kind of prototype to July when you're shipping 40,000 units or so?
It is. You can ramp pretty quickly. I mean, we had a lot of experience doing the original development kit, so we had a lot of our manufacturing process in place, even though we made a number of changes and we've added a lot of complexity in terms of the display and the optics and everything else. We've still been able to maintain the quality level we want, and it's all been good so far.
All right, so and 40,000 is the number that you guys are kind of sharing.
I think we'll ship probably 20 to 30,000 in July, I believe. Don't quote me too much on that, but that's the plan right now. And then, if you place an order today, you should receive it in August.
Demand has been pretty high. It's been almost as much as in the pre-orders as the entire run of DK1.
Yeah, and that's super exciting. I mean, we have taken, like we said, 40,000 pre-orders for DK2, and so we're really excited to get those out to the community. If you look at how many games are now on Share, actually, Oculus Share, which is sort of our sharing site for devs, there's almost 190 titles, all for DK1. So we're pretty excited, getting this out in terms of the low persistence, the positional tracking. It'll open a lot of opportunities for new game design, like a lot of the things you're seeing today. Wouldn't have been possible on DK1.
Right. Since GDC, of course, like a week after GDC, big announcement.
Yes.
Facebook acquired you guys. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
How has that changed your roadmap for consumer version 1, CV1?
Sure. So for CV1, in terms of the Facebook acquisition, we've really been able to turbocharge a lot of the features, to be honest with you. I mean, there's a lot of things we wanted to do in CV1 and we were constantly wrestling basically with price, right? The more features you pack into it, if it goes to, for retail, for example, retail adds 30% on top. So there's this constant battle where every dollar you add, you're basically adding $3 to the device. And that's before like manufacturing and logistics and all this other stuff. So with Facebook involved now, we're able to do a lot more, and we really do want to focus on scale and growth. And so we're going to be shipping these at a lot more of an affordable price. It's not this drastic reduction, but we're going to try to sell them for basically as cheap as we can.
Yeah, Palmer said yesterday in an interview, basically at cost.
And I think there's a lot of ways to view at cost, because like shipping, for example, adds something. So it's not at the bill of materials, for example, but it will be basically as cheap as we can get it. And again, it's all about getting as many people into VR as possible. We want it to be the type of thing where it's like, no matter who's interested in VR, they can afford to go out, grab a consumer, Rift, take it home, and experience some great content.
Then, in terms of choosing the features, do you then choose, to put more expensive components inside?
Yes.
Or yes, you want the best
more
experience.
Expensive components, but when we say expensive components, it's really about the quality of the components. So for example, our camera, there's all these different trade-offs in terms of like field of view and resolution and things like that. So we're able to deliver a much better, higher quality experience that does feel a lot more magical in terms of like ease of use and simplicity and the quality of sort of the tracking and everything else that would have been previously impossible, just due to like cost constraints.
How far along are you in locking down those specs then for CV1?
We're very close. Definitely, to be totally frank, I think Facebook, the acquisition, definitely shook it up a bit in a good way. It enabled us where we felt like we were very close, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, possibilities just changed. We can move to this sort of impossible roadmap, like pie in the sky. What would we do?
But you still want to get a product out.
Absolutely. So it hasn't significantly delayed it. But it has definitely changed our approach. We've always had, oh man, if we could afford this component, this is what we'd pick. And we were constantly doing balancing. Then it was like, okay, well, we can just go with the best in class on everything and still meet sort of the price point that we want to hit. So everything's been really good in that sense.
Now, you have a lot of new hires. So Michael Abrash came over from Valve, and what he was doing with VR and the technology and the type of tracking he was doing, a little bit different than what you guys are doing. What has he brought to the Oculus team, and have you guys decided to adopt any of the things he was doing?
So Abrash and the team at Valve, so it was Abrash, Ottman Binstock, Aaron Nichols came over, Neil Konzen recently joined, Brian Sharp recently joined, Forsyth had come over. There's a lot of people from the Valve team who are working specifically on VR research. They were doing a lot of different things. That team was really focused on, in my opinion, what does VR, what does it look like, 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future, and really trying to build consumer or R&D prototypes, not consumer-facing products, to show people just how good VR can be. So there is this, The Room, the famous demo that I think really set the bar in the industry.
With the QR codes.
Exactly, the fiducial markers all over the walls. Now, a lot of that tech wasn't even necessarily, the fiducial tracking system wasn't even necessarily developed for VR, by that team, but they were able to leverage that to deliver this awesome experience that, again, sort of set the bar and definitely changed our roadmap. Once we saw that, we were like, oh man, DK2's down here, we really need to deliver CV1 at an experience either on par or better, because the presence you get in the room is something that's truly extraordinary.
But it's not going to be a fundamental shift in the way you're developing Oculus,
No,
right?
and if you look at, for example, those, the QR codes, the fiducial markers that you're talking about, that prototype, The Room, isn't productizable in the way that they have it today. Now, again, we looked at it and we were like, okay, there's a ton to learn from this in terms of not how they're approaching these problems, but some of the breakthroughs they made. Low persistence, the importance of 6DoF tracking, low latency, all that stuff. So Abrash hasn't brought over necessarily any of those ideas, but their team, and especially the R&D team in Seattle, Abrash, Ottman, and a lot of those guys, they are doing sort of the same thing in the sense of looking 5 to 10 years in the future. What are the breakthroughs that we need to make between CV1 of the Rift and the holodeck to deliver the holodeck,
That's the end goal.
That is the end goal, to deliver the best platform for VR games, hands down.
Now, things you can do with software. So Carmack's working on software. He did a white paper talking about little things you can do to reduce latency.
Yes.
And things that are implemented in SDK. Things we haven't shared with our readers, like things like time warp. Can you explain what that concept is?
So I'm not the best person to explain time warp, because if I do it right now, I will mess it up. But basically, time warp and asynchronous time warp are a way that we can, in some ways artificially, increase the frame rate of a game when the frame rate might be a little bit low. So it's something we're still experimenting with. It's a very complex topic, especially in the sense of how do you put that into an SDK where game developers feel really confident about the way it's being integrated, because a lot of it is very close to the metal, so to speak. So it's not like it's just, we'll just make this call to the Oculus SDK. It actually changes sometimes the initialization of your rendering. So
in terms of low persistence vision, you need that 75 FPS.
Exactly. So if you look at draining the latency out of the pipeline and targeting zero latency as the goal, some of these games, they're running at 30 hertz, 60 hertz, and even DK1 was the 60 hertz target. As we move toward pushing for a higher frame rate, whether it's 75 or 90 or 120, this is something that potentially will help developers get to those higher frame rates, those lower latencies, consequently. But there's still a lot of work to be done on making it all work properly, and there's a lot of challenges.
You can't control what the consumer has in terms of their PC, right? So
yes.
How will CV1 scale? I mean, we want the best. We want a 1440p screen, but how are you going to make it widely accessible to people who don't have the highest end gaming rigs?
So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face, especially from a product and user experience perspective, is that right now, if the CV1 was out, if Consumer Rift was out, and we said, you asked me how do I get one? I'd say, okay, you go buy the Consumer Rift. But you're also going to need a gaming rig. And you're like, well, what gaming rig? What are the specs? Ooh, tough question.
Yeah.
You need probably a high-end machine with probably these demos running a 780 Ti. That's probably only going to get higher. So for us, we're looking at a lot of different approaches, whether it's a recommended specification or potentially even partnering with some manufacturers to have Oculus-ready machines. There's a lot of different ways to approach it. We're exploring sort of all of them. And it's not to say that you won't be able to plug the Rift into a lower end machine like a MacBook Air, for example. You can have a compelling experience on a low end machine, even a mobile device.
Right.
It's just not going to be Lucky's Tale or Alien Isolation. It's going to be something like VR cinema.
Now, would you be happy if CV1 shipped with something like a 1080p, what you have here?
Maybe. I could be happier.
We could always be happier.
We could always be happier, right. I think VR, in terms of the resolution, does have a ways to go, and we will continue to push on the resolution side, and we're going to continue to consume CPU and GPU across the board, because it's really going to be amazing what people can do with more horsepower underneath.
Now, you mentioned mobile, and there are rumors that the Oculus experience could move beyond you guys making just the hardware yourself. What
Definitely.
defines the Oculus experience? Is it the software? Is it the hardware that you build?
Good question. So for us, it's really the experience. It's the end-to-end, I guess that just repeated what you said, but it is the entire experience, the software, Not necessarily the hardware, although that is a key part of it, because the hardware has to be able to support the experience we want to deliver, sort of that end experience. It's the content, it's the platform, all the services that we're providing in terms of Oculus identity and authentication and entitlement, things like that. So that is Oculus, this whole encompass thing, content as well. We've been talking about first-party content, third-party content.
You're going to be a first-party developer.
We will.
You're building a platform. You got the guys from Steam. You got the Naughty Dog guy.
Yes.
And so
Jason Rubin, Jason Holtman.
The Jasons, basically like the Nintendo model, where they have the 3DS, but they want to develop first-party content that's going to be proof of concept and set the bar high.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the community has already set the bar high. We just want to be also contributing to it and showing developers what's possible. So going back to what you said on the mobile front, there is this question of, well, I think we have said many times, like, we want to have an Android SDK, and in a very simplistic sense, that you could plug the Rift into, like, imagine NVIDIA Shield, or like, the new Tegra devices, or even your phone, or a high-end tablet, Android tablet. So there's a lot of possibilities there. Again, those are going to be lo-fi experiences. You won't experience the same presence, but we were talking before about like panoramas and 360 videos. That is a cool way to check those things out. You can do things like Oculus Cinema, that's compelling. But it is a different experience from like the presence you get on the PC higher end side.
One last question. You said that you get best camera now. You can afford to get that ability. Motion tracking, that's something people are really interested in. A lot of Kickstarters. What are the barriers to motion tracking right now? Getting your hands in the game.
Got it. So there's a lot of different startups across the board doing interesting hand tracking. Whether it's Leap Motion's very obvious one. Kinect does some stuff. There's people like 3Gear and some of the others.
Do you think it's important to create a standard for that?
I do think that it's important. I think we haven't seen yet what is the ideal VR input, and that's something that we're really focused on, both in R&D and in core tech, because we do feel like it's really critical to have an input method that's designed for VR that really adds to the experience and allows you to interact with things naturally like you want to. Every person we put in the Rift, the first thing they do generally is try to reach out and touch something. And we want to enable that. And I often say it's like, not only that, but you want to feel whatever you're reaching out and touching. All of these different people, Kinect, Leap Motion, all these different products, none of them have cracked the code for VR. And I think that's because most of them have been designed for different goals in mind, right? Kinect is definitely, it's more like puppeting an avatar for the Xbox in the living room. At the end of the day, we haven't cracked the code. I don't think anyone else has, and we really do want to have an incredible input device that helps move us toward that holodeck experience.
All right, thank you so much, Nate. I know that was a lot to throw at you, but thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
At E3, you guys have showed us some amazing games. We'll be recapping our experiences with these hands-on demos. I'm Norm. We'll see you guys next time. Bye. Thank you.
Okay, Norm, I just got out of the Oculus demos.
We played 3 demos.
Right. This is new because it's real games. It's not tech demos or things that somebody cooked up just to show the product. This is actually like 3 in-progress games, things that you will be able to buy in the future, although not necessarily in VR mode.
And they're a good spectrum of what developer sizes. So the first thing we want to talk about is Alien Isolation.
Yeah.
This is a AAA. Sega's making this game, made not specifically for VR.
Sega's publishing this game.
Creative Assembly, but not made. It's made for traditional console play.
It is a PS4, Xbox One, PC flat screen game. But apparently they took a small team of people, built some custom art, custom programming to put a VR mode into the game. And it makes sense because survival horror games. Some of the best experiences we had early with VR were survival horror games. And I thought it worked pretty well. Like the setup for the games that you're on a space station, you have the motion tracker from Alien. You have no weapons. Your only goal is to avoid the alien. Avoiding the alien was hard, at least for me. And it was very moody and very scary. But I didn't get a massive sense of presence.
So I didn't either. A lot of that was because of how the controller looked on screen. So when we play a game like Hawken or Eve Valkyrie, you can look around. A virtual cockpit. The cockpit is static. And here, because you didn't have your hand actually holding the controller, you triggered it by tapping the shoulder button. It just propped up, and it was like it was on a Steadicam, kind of floating in front of you.
So what you're saying is that, like, when you move your hands in the game, when you jump back to dodge, it didn't move as well.
Right, and they're trying to figure that out. I mean, when you move your head, you're actually looking down, and they want you to look forward, look behind the smoke, and then look down at the motion tracker. But if you move your head too far, the tracker moves, so that you're not looking completely around.
Well, and because there were 2 modes of turning, you had fine control by turning your head, you had kind of broader control by turning the stick. that always kind of takes me out of it a little bit.
Now, they did develop some cool things for this demo. For example, when you can hide inside a locker and you can peer outside
through
the
slots.
the slots of the locker when you're hiding from the alien.
I didn't know that.
That's kind of thing that VR benefits from, because then you're actually peering left and right, maybe not sticking your head through the locker, but actually peering. Now, because this game isn't developed with Oculus, just for Oculus, it needs to accommodate all the gameplay.
They're going to sell most of the copies for Xbox One and
for
PS4.
flat screen TVs. It does feel like it's an extra feature tacked on.
I mean, I'm okay with that. Like, if you could fire up Skyrim and go explore Skyrim with a virtual reality, like, I'm fine if that feels a little tacked on. The next game, however, is currently on Kickstarter game, and it's both a VR game and a normal game, or is it just for VR? I don't know.
It's both VR and normal. Again, this is one of those things where the developer, it's developed out of a game jam, Superhot, simple first-person shooter game, high concept.
It's almost like a puzzle game.
Right, but they modified it to work with Oculus. So the idea behind this is that it's bullet time, Braid, but first-person shooter. When you move forward, that's when time goes forward, but the bullets always come at you. And all they have to do to adapt it for VR is to narrow the hitboxes.
Right.
And so the hitbox is your head, and then you can actually dodge the bullet as it comes at you.
But that's the thing that changes, is that you can actually move your head. So you can stop time by stopping moving, and then you just move your head to the side, move your head to the other side, and weave between the bullets, which is what I was able to do the first or second time.
If you make a dramatic move, like if the bullet's coming at you here and you move your head this way, you can do that. But it was tough to figure out exactly what the distance between your hitbox and the bullet was in the game. For example, one sequence, 2 bullets came at me, and they're getting closer, and I didn't know if I could actually just hide between them, and it actually just hit me, and I died.
Couldn't thread the needle.
No.
I was doing some big sweeping head movements. I kept whacking people in I assume the butt while I was doing that, playing that game. It was really neat. Like, that was a good experience. The virtual reality stuff was really good. Like, the interesting thing about both of these demos is that the VR kind of faded away, and I stopped thinking about things like persistence of vision, like the density of the screen and all that. And I just was like, wow, these are fun games.
You're thinking about how do you solve this puzzle of the bullets coming at you and moving.
And we got a taste of that with the Valkyrie, almost a year ago now. But this was a much bigger jump forward in terms of gameplay. Now, the last game was amazing.
Lucky's Tale.
Lucky's Tale. It's a platformer.
It's a straight up Super Mario Galaxy style platformer.
I would say 64/3D world. You're not on the spheres. So, but you have a cartoony kind of 3D world. And the thing that I immediately noticed is that, when you're playing Mario 64 or Mario 3D World or 3D Land or whatever, you kind of have a hard time telling where you are in the depth. And because you have full 3D with this, the camera seemed to be on a track that kind of followed along the outside of the course. And then you could make precise jumps onto stuff that was in the Z-axis, which has really been hard, even on like the 3DS, which has depth on the screen.
Now, they're doing some really cool tricks, and this is a game we should make clear, Oculus is publishing and is Oculus exclusive.
Yeah.
So not only is it a whole different genre that we haven't seen with VR before, but this is developed solely for VR. The example they gave, the metaphor they gave, was it's like your God view on a board. And when we saw the tabletop game at GDC, it's kind of like that, but except it was a platform.
There's an actual game here too. So, the art style was really good. They were running all these demos on an i7 with a 780 Ti, GTX 780 Ti. So it's a high-end gaming PC, but not an inaccessible gaming PC. It's not like they had 3 Titans in these machines.
Well, the thing that I want to say about Lucky's Tale is that the camera is on a track. So while you're controlling where your head looks, it is still like your third-person platformer where the camera can swing. It does it in a more graceful way, so it's not a hard swing.
They were gentle movements.
Very gentle, and I talked to Nate, and he said that they're actually still figuring that out. That kind of camera moving without your head wanting it to move at times, because you're just moving the character, that gave me a little bit of nausea.
Oh, see, that stuff doesn't bother me, but I was curious to hear that. That's interesting. The other thing about that last game, the Lucky's Tale, is that it felt the most like a video game of anything we've played, anything I've played with VR to date. Like, it was, you didn't have the sense of presence. There was no intent to get a sense of presence with that. There's no godlike hands controlling a gamepad, but it felt like something I could sit down and play for hours, as opposed to a cool tech demo that I would spend 20 minutes on and then go do something else.
So that's why Oculus has hired game developers, artists, programmers, because they want to develop first-party games. They want to be like Nintendo and make the Mario Kart and make the Super Smash Brothers and make the Mario Galaxy of the Oculus world, just like Nintendo had to prove to gamers that the Wiimote was good for games and 3DS was good for games. They need to prove to gamers, broad gamers, not just enthusiasts, that VR is going to be good for games.
And I think I think we're seeing evidence of that now. Still no word on when the hardware is going to be done.
No. Nate said that
still shipping in July.
Dev kit somewhere in July. My feeling is that's probably going to be, without a specific date, probably toward the end of July.
It sounded like they had dev kits, like they've already found some problems in the dev kits with the ones that they've seeded out that probably won't be fixed in the dev kits, but they'll fix in consumer stuff from what they were saying. So, I mean, I still don't think I'd buy a dev kit.
Yeah.
But
we're both getting dev kits. It's still something we wouldn't recommend people buy right now.
Yeah, do as we say, not as we do.
Right.
So that's Oculus. Anything else you think, Norm? I mean, I didn't get to hear what you guys were talking about because I had headphones on.
I think CV won't be a dramatic difference from dev kit. I don't think they're going to change the sitting down Oculus experience, the sphere of movement.
Maybe change the width of the camera. I did notice that if you really stretched, you could get outside of the field of vision of the camera. Sitting in a chair, probably 5 feet away from the camera.
Yeah, all the big things that they had projected forward. A camera in the front of the Oculus, making Oculus super lightweight. I don't think that's necessarily going to come with CV1. I think they're going to polish what they have so far and get the games out, because the games are the most important.
In the longer term, it was really clear talking to Brandon and Nate that they are definitely looking at other hardware for control. Like they are aware that there's a gap between what they're doing and what Sony's doing with the Move. People want to be able to move their hands, and getting like actual translated movement into your 3D world is a big part of establishing presence. So I would think that they're probably going to finish the glasses and then move on to some other stuff that'll enhance the experience. Yeah. So that's Oculus. We've got a lot more from E3 2014. Until then, we'll see you guys on Tested.
Bye.